excellent connection. I don't see anybody.
Nobody's waiting on us? Man.
0 views.
Man.
Oh, well. Just you and me. Fine, whatever.
Man.
I do
Oh,
now I
goodness.
do remember Joe saying that he had a thing, and I don't remember what it was. And now it's
Oh.
buried in all of our banter. And then I know, uh, for those of you that are wondering, Moss is going to be. It's unclear how long, but he's going to take a little time off. Uh, some take some me time away from the show.
Mm-hmm.
What's not clear is he going to take me time away from uh, distro hoppers, and he also does Full Circle Weekly News, which is an invaluable show for me because it is just a code dump of news. I mean, it's the most comprehensive Linux news show out there because he just rattles it off, and then if you find something interesting, you can go and look into it more on your own.
It's hard to keep up sometimes. I have to uh, routinely pause
Yeah,
and, like, yeah.
I I've had to. I'd be in the middle of listening to it, and I'm using AntennaPod, and what I'll do is I'll hit the little star on there. That way, it doesn't delete it because I want to go back through it again
Yeah.
because it's just a 10-minute show, and he's rattling that stuff off, and he's admitted more than once that most of the stuff he's talking about he has no idea what it is, and
Yeah, right. You can tell he's just like reading the words off the
yeah,
screen. Yeah.
which
But hey, I think I'd be in the same boat with some of
some of
that
that
stuff.
stuff, yeah.
I can't believe, like at the end of Distro Hoppers, he's reading off all of the releases, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of distributions, and
Oh,
like I don't recognize half of them, but they're out there.
the first time I heard that thing at the end of the show where he's reading off all the distribution, I'm like, he is literally. Where's he getting that from? Distro Watch? Is he going down the list of
Maybe,
distribution? And
but I
then he,
swear I've never even seen someone there.
yeah.
I don't know where he's getting it. I know Eric the what's his name? Eric the I can't remember the guy's name who compiles the list
Oh,
of.
Eric
Well,
Dan
that no,
Redding.
that's yeah, that's for that show specifically. So I guess Distro Watch he's doing it himself or Distro Watch, Distro Hoppers. Oh, Bill,
Hey,
these days where you talk for hours at a time, the brain starts to go.
it gets brutal, especially
It
mintcast
does, man.
weekends. After mintcast, I have to decompress. Really.
Hey, you pulled that Torvalds thing out. You're like what is it, an exorcist like pulling it out of your
These
brain.
things come to me, and I gotta hurry up and get them out. Otherwise, it just bounces around in there. Uh,
Oh, goodness.
well, respawn is in here with us watching, um,
Okay.
so that's
Hello.
good. Uh, I have not set up a chat for myself. I'm just using the mintcast one for the upload. All this stuff running at the same time. It gets to be daunting. Um,
Yeah.
I really think with OTC, um, I was instantly proud of what that became, and now I think it's even better with you and Majid on there. I want
It's just fun.
oh, it is because it's the chance to. I mean, every other show's got a it's got a context, it's got a structure, it's got rules you have to follow, I guess. And Mintcast
Yeah.
being just an old, very venerable Linux, first generation Linux podcast. I mean, it goes back to like 2003, I think. it has been around a long time, and so in I kind of feel obligated to not change too much about the way that show goes, and but at the same time, I
Right.
had these things I wanted to do, and I wanted it to be more um, kind of off the cuff, and so this new show kind of gave us the opportunity to do that without like making seismic changes because I think there are people that would have a tough time with mintCast if all of a sudden we just shifted gears and was a lot more improvisational. As much as it might feel natural,
Right. Right.
it.
Well, and also that's our take on it, right? I mean, we have a very distinct idea of what a podcast is and what it can be, and I think in general in life, I always tend to prefer seeing someone in an interview situation, or I like to see someone speaking their mind as who they are, and less about like furthering an agenda or speaking talking points that's someone else came up with. I Even if they believe in them, like I just and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the factual correctness of reading a news article. And I think that's probably what the balance of mintcast is that you have both of those things where there is something. So on Off the Cuff and a lot of other shows, what is often lacking is the setup, right? You start talking about something and you have sort of an assumption that your audience is there with you, right? They're on the same level. And I think for a lot of people, depending on the niche or the subject matter, like that's probably true. But for something like technical, like a lot of the stories and stuff that comes up on Mintcast, having that the read of the copy first before it prompts a conversation makes a lot of sense. I guess sometimes where it falls down is if the story's just too long or too technical, or that there's really no feedback. Like it's just read this story, no commentary, no opinion or anything, go to the next story,
Yeah.
no commentary, no opinion, like as if it's just filler in a way. Like I feel like if the hosts were, I don't know, like I feel like there would be a certain amount of buy-in, or I don't know, opinion on, and maybe that's maybe that's my, I have this sort of concept of dead air where it's like you don't want to have dead air. You want to have something in that space, and the something, you know, I don't know how to explain it because it's I have listened to so many podcasts where there is space, there is dead air, and I think like how do they do that where it works? Because I feel like every time I've tried to create something and I take those long pauses or I try to craft it in such a way, like I think there's something to that I'm not getting. But anyway, I
I think
digress.
it,
I've
it
gone way
well,
off.
no, I know. I think I know what you're saying. I think there's some value in when you're setting up the list of topics that you're going to discuss. Try to consider whether or not I mean, know your cohorts. Know the things
Yeah.
that they've got opinions about, and if you've got this thing sometimes you have an article that is just interesting enough by itself that the commentary is not quite as important, but in most cases, especially when it's something that might not be immediately not something that everybody knows a lot about, and you kind of
Yeah.
need people to put a little context, a little commentary, and it's worth like taking the time
Well,
to consider how much conversation might be spun up, when you're selecting what articles to put in, you know. So
I think that's a valid point, but then I think also maybe something I hadn't considered until just now as you were saying it, is so you have the text of the story, which is good because you're getting all the sort of the factual information. But I think oftentimes there's also room for um, being able to sort of expand on that or explain it a little better because even in the stories, sometimes there is not a really good introduction of like what the project is. Like there's it's a release and we talk about new features and stuff like that, but maybe we don't actually say what the project is, what it does, why it's interesting. And I understand that if you tried to tease out every story that you're going to have a 5 hour long podcast, but maybe that speaks more towards being a little more editorial in terms of or selective in terms of like what are the stories that people maybe that's part of this process, right? Where we're getting together and spending this time. Right. I mean, mintCast is unlike a lot of the other podcasts I've ever done where you have so much preparation go into the actual content. But what I've found is that this time isn't really, and this is my, I've only been here a couple times, so this is like a very outsider, uninformed opinion. I just feel like we don't really come here and talk about like what we're going to do on the podcast
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so I think even if we just spent a little slice of this time kind of looking at, well, what are the stories? Um, do you have an opinion? Do you care? Does anyone have an idea? Does someone want to talk about this? Is there anything is this actually worth putting in here? Because there are a million different ways for people to get Linux news, right?
Hmm.
There are literally, and what happens is if you listen to enough podcasts, and I'm sure this happens to you tend to hear the same stuff in the same time period. Like the Red Hat thing. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to talk about the Red Hat thing for the next month. That's all you're going to hear about, at least in one segment of their podcast is Red Hat, and their source code, or whatever the story of the moment is. And I actually kind of like the I think the value that a podcast brings to the audience is the hosts themselves. I mean, that's why we're here, and that's why people are listening. Is that our interpretation, our take on something, our it's not. I'm not even going to say it's expertise because I don't consider myself an expert in just about anything, but I have experience, and I think that's probably where I'm drawing. I'm trying to add some value to this content, not just read it like like AI can do that now.
Yeah.
They don't need us to do that anymore.
Well, we've
you
had
know,
text to speech for a long time,
right? And really good text to speech too, and it's only getting better. So I don't think anybody's going to be making a living reading copy anymore. It's going to be about the interpretation. It's going to be about the commentary, and and I think that's
and
on OTC. Yeah,
I take your point about not utilizing the, the resource that we have to take time to kind of make sure that everybody is on the same sheet of music. Let's go over these notes. Let's see. What do you think about this? Can we take this out? What do you think about adding this in? We really do need to do more of that because the temptation, I think, I realized right away when I came on the show, the temptation on, especially on this particular show, is just to completely go off the rails. And I wonder if that is because we do so little of it on the actual show that the roundtable and then indeed to a lesser extent the Saturday meeting on the weekend of the show, which should be all business, if you
yeah,
ask me. Um,
right.
the temptation is always there to go off talking about a million other things, and we almost always do. Um, so I
And
think
there's nothing wrong with
not
that.
really, but
There's
I
room for that,
I think
but
you need to take the time to get your heads together and make sure that we're putting together a coherent show. There's no
yeah.
surprises when showtime comes, and then it's also that's a time when you're putting your heads together and you might come up with things to add to the show, or you might come up with ideas to add to segments like the check this out. Sometimes the check this out segment gets neglected because if somebody doesn't just put something in there on their own, it just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
I think we could probably do a better job of talking about subjects, and then as we talk about it, we find something. Hey, I'm going to put that in. Check this out. So that I think these are valid points. They really are. So
I just, it's an observation, and that's really what it comes down to. Is because Moss, whenever he was saying like, hey, you should come check out mintCast, and I think you'd like it, and we'd love to have you, and but understand that it's a pretty big commitment of time. And I kept thinking, well, the podcast isn't that, like, I maybe, okay, it takes some time to record it, and guaranteed, or considering last time it was like, all right, it's been 3 hours. Like, I didn't expect to be sitting here for this long. So I get that side of it, but what I wasn't understanding was all of the extra meetings and like roundtable and like all the other stuff. Like, that's just so atypical of anything else I've done, where it's
yeah,
basically you put together some notes, and a lot of times those notes, like Leo was saying, like they're bullet points in a lot of ways. Like, they're basically just prompts. Like, there's no verbiage there. It's prompt,
hmm
right? There's no script. It's just because I'm terrible, and it's something I want to improve on. Just as someone who does this, like, I'm in no way like a professional podcaster, but I realize I spend enough time on a microphone that, and there are enough people listening to my voice that I owe it to them to try to be decent at this. And so, like, I would like to get better at reading copy, but I suck at it right now. Like, I listen to myself at reading something, and it's terrible compared to me and you having a conversation.
yeah,
There's no emotion, there's no inflection, there's just, and I try really hard, but it's just not the same, you know. And I don't know, like you said, Moss reading the news, and you know what you're getting, and it's
it
boiled
works.
down,
It works
quick.
great for something like that.
Exactly. But I
Um,
think long form, where you're in it for an hour or more, sometimes that just reading feels a little slow,
and the
a little
truth is,
detached.
we are reading an article that is published somewhere else. You know,
Right.
and
That's not our words. It's
that's
even
not our
harder because
words. Yes.
yeah.
And when I think of news, my favorite news is like, well, late night Linux, for example, when they do the news, he just sometimes he doesn't even read the headline. He'll kind of
Just prompt.
take the headline
Yeah.
and say it the way he says things, and then it
Yep.
becomes, maybe everybody will have something to say about it. Maybe only one or two people have something to say, and it'll be people. If it's only one or two people, it'll be the people that are directly involved. Now that podcast is 100% nearly, with the exception of Joe, um, professional IT people.
Right. Right.
I think I get the idea when I look way back on mintCast. I get the idea that the original intent for this show was to be as community oriented as absolutely possible. And there is some uniqueness in that, but I'm not sure we've done enough to uh, cash in on that concept.
I I think, other than thanking Clem and the rest of the team at the end of the episode, in many cases, that is really the mint content for the
Right.
show, you know? And honestly, I mean, I'm a Mint user. I use it every day on my laptop. I have for a long time. I've not always used it as my primary distro, but like, I have a lot of background and experience with using Mint, and I use it for very good reasons, even though I know a lot about all these other distros. That think that says something. I wish there are some things I'd like to change about it, but I think that's probably true of just about anything. But anyway, my point being that on any given week to week basis, I probably have something mint related that I could talk about, or there's something happening in the community, or there's something happening on the blog, or there's something happening somewhere that is mint related that if it's called mintCast, like that should be pretty float pretty high to the top, right?
Yeah.
There should always be some cornerstone piece of the content we're creating that has mint all over it, you know? And I don't feel like that's true. And
And
maybe it was. And maybe that's what's different. I don't know.
yeah, because I was using Mint mm, all the way back in the beginning.
Me too.
And the interesting thing about Mint is that it had a very different purpose in those days.
Mm-hmm.
It was a version of Ubuntu you could get all the
Mm-hmm.
codecs on, you know. And then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, you could
Yep.
get these things to work on Ubuntu if you added all these VLC libraries and all this or
Oh
whatever.
my goodness.
That was a
BRM. Oh
pain
my
in the hind end.
DVDs. Everything was such a hassle.
And you
Oh my
felt like
goodness.
you were doing something, against the law. You were hacking,
Underhanded. Right. 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 Right.
or you
Yeah.
could just install Mint, and you would have something that works right out of the
And
box.
everything worked.
And
Yep.
that was the value.
Magic.
So then, when Ubuntu started just including all of these, there was a very understandable conversation. Like, okay, well, where is Mint's place now? Where does Mint
Right.
show up? And
By the way, this is a killer conversation for the
yeah,
podcast.
but I mean,
Just saying.
here we
Continue,
are.
please. I'm
You
just
know,
saying, like, make mental note, like, please, this is awesome stuff for that purpose.
and I've
But
often
anyway, you're
thought,
right.
you
What do
know,
you do next? Now you were the easy way for people to, and at that point, everything was still physical media. Streaming wasn't a
yes,
thing. Like, so you were watching stuff on DVD, you were getting files from somewhere maybe, but there wasn't streaming. So you needed to have local playback capability for all of these crazy codecs and all of this.
yeah,
Like, it was just a different time. And that was so hard. And browsers didn't have it was hard to get the the live wire and all that, all that kind of stuff like working properly in a browser. Like, and I agree with you. I was just fighting with Ubuntu one day, and that's how I found Mint, because it was just like there has got to be an easier way to do this. I'm so sick of every time I run an update, something breaking or like, and and I found Mint and I tried it, and I'm like, holy cow, are
it
you
just
kidding me? Like
works. Are
this
you
is
kidding me?
it's amazing. And and I think that's that early magic, absolutely. That sort of propelled interest and growth. And then you're right. Okay, now that Ubuntu said we're just going to do that ourselves, and that's not really the value add anymore, then what is it now that we do? And I think they transitioned to being the most complete usable distro. I wanted to say new user or user friendly, but the truth is, for me, the reason I use it is because it's the most usable distro in terms of like everything's just put together for you. And hey, they probably put a lot of thought into why that works that way, or the welcome screen taking you through the setup. And even though I'm an experienced user, it's still helpful to maybe think, oh, I didn't set up backups, or I
And
didn't,
I,
like,
I wonder if one value also is the fact that with all of the hoopla out there with Wayland and Pipewire and then GNOME 40 and all that back and forth drama, you can still install Mint and you've still got your choice between three user interfaces that still look and behave somewhat similar to Windows. And as painful as
yep,
that to say, that is valuable because that's what people want. They want something that they know how to use, that
right.
they can figure out, that they can rely on just working without all of the drama of all these new technologies that are coming
Yeah.
along, that everybody keeps saying you have to. Oh, you got to have Wayland. Well, okay, then you try it and half your stuff doesn't work. Right back to Mint I go. You know,
Oh, you wanted to have keyboard shortcuts?
uh,
Oh no, sorry, we don't have those.
it Yeah, you want remote desktop? No. Okay. Yeah, no.
No. Wait, you need that? Do people use that? Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, it.
Let me go back and fix these specs real quick. Yeah,
Oh, and you
I
drive
know.
yourself nuts thinking, okay, well, it must be great because everybody keeps telling me I need to use it. So
Yeah.
I got to learn how to use this stuff, and no, no, it ain't working yet. So right back.
Well, and then, the argument can be, well, if people aren't using it, then, it'll never get mature because, well, they have to spend time hacking on X to make that work. And, all this misplaced effort. And if only people would just sign on and start using Wayland, then all of these problems would suddenly somehow be addressed. Like, I'm sorry, it's a fallacy. Uh, I don't doubt that there's some amount of truth to the fact that a larger user base allows you to cover more ground in terms of like knowing what your bigger problems are. But it sure as hell doesn't make any of them go away. It just probably, if anything, amplifies them. And yeah, Mint doesn't have an immediate plan for dealing with Wayland, particularly in Cinnamon. But I don't think that matters to their user base right now.
No.
And if it does, there are other choices. You can use one of the other desktops, or you could use a different distro. Like it's okay. Not everything needs to be a one size fits all, but at the same time, there's no reason you can't just keep using X the way because it works. Unless you're using really weird hardware, and really weird meaning like just maybe super high end cutting edge stuff. Like there are definite benefits to using Wayland in very specific situations for a very small number of people comparative to the overall install base.
And there are things you have to learn how to do all over again when you move to something like Wayland. Just because, like for example, when I'm making three fat truckers, sometimes I'll play a video that's local here on this machine. Now, Wayland, if I'm running Video Ninja in Chromium, for example, Wayland will not allow you to capture a video from another application outside of Chromium. That's just a security feature of Wayland. It will not allow
Right.
you to go outside. So you got to learn how to work around those things. I mean, it's a complete. I feel like if we would have been forced, if the whole ecosystem was set up to where when they come up with a new technology, everybody's just forced to go use it, I think we would have lost users back to Windows, honestly, because,
Yeah.
it just.
I got to take a call.
Okay. How's it
Got to
going,
talk to
Joe?
Jim.
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's happening?
I'm just working.
Just working.
Mm-hmm.
I got home at 3
Very
o'clock in the
exciting.
morning this morning because I had to get back to get my DOT physical done at 8 o'clock this morning, so I drove 19 hours to get back. So
That sucks.
I've not actually had a full night's sleep yet because
So right after this, you're gonna go crash?
no, because I got three fat truckers at, I'm not sure if it's going to be 7 or 8, and then I got to do all the editing for both
You
OTC.
should be able to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep.
I did get a nap earlier after my physical appointment. I came back home and laid down, and then the problem with me is I take a 2-hour nap and then wake up feeling like dog shit. I mean, just not wanting to get out of bed.
Mm.
And sometimes I don't get fully rehabilitated, I guess, until well into Sunday, and then it's time to start thinking about going
Well,
back on the road.
you pound a pot of coffee, and then you take a 45-minute nap, and you're ready to go for another 48 hours.
Yeah, it works great when you're young.
Works for me. I'm not young.
Oh gosh, when I was in my 20s, I almost never slept until I would get to where I just couldn't function anymore, and then just crashed for 18 hours and then get up and start the whole process all over again.
Yeah, it's actually like, I think one of the earlier symptoms of apnea.
Yeah.
Because I did not sleep during like most of my teens. and then my 20s, and then yeah, I kind of crashed hard in my late 20s, early 30s.
Oh. So we're doing AOSP.
I guess so.
Okay.
I'll have to dig into it a bit more.
I know very little about it except that it's.
Well, I used to do a lot of, custom ROM stuff, but I haven't done that in like more than a decade.
It's not many people are talking about that stuff anymore. I know Resington used to talk about lineage and oh
Right.
god.
There used to be a lot of purpose behind it because you used to be really, really limited on what you could do with the stock ROM. And then now they've kind of opened things up a little bit, and it's not as much of an issue as it used to be. So unless you have an older phone, then yeah, and custom ROMing, unless you do it just right, I mean, you can't use like Google Pay anymore.
Yeah, that's true. You end up with a GIMP device.
Right.
I mean, is that true with the I knew it was true if you rooted the device. Is that true if you just use a
Well, you have to root the device to put a custom ROM on it.
Oh, okay, then you can't remove the root after the custom ROM is on there.
Well, there's oh gosh, what is it? There's a special thing in the BIOS. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a marker in the BIOS that says whether or not it's been, completely rewritten. I'll have to look it up again. But that is what prevents a lot of your pay stuff from working.
Well, that's not very useful
Yeah.
because of those things like Google Pay and Apple Pay, they're
The way of the future.
Yeah, they are because the card readers are shit.
Yeah.
They work
I mean,
about-
if you look at, other countries, and other countries are usually the indicator for where the cell phone and mobile space is going in general. Everybody else is already using their phones for basically everything other than identity. And that's supposed to be changing too. So, yeah, I expect that in another 5 years, maybe 10 years, that's all we're going to use to pay is our phone.
I suppose I don't have
And
a
it
huge problem with that.
it does provide an extra layer of security if you have like biometrics set up on your phone or something. So you have to put in your thumbprint and verify it's you before you can tap to pay.
Right.
So
I suppose I trust that better than taking my card out of my pocket and
the PIN code,
yeah, all that garbage. I don't
because
use it that much, but I mean, I have it and
yeah, well, I don't use it as much as I probably should either, but right now my card, I need to replace my card. It's just worn the hell out because, I don't carry cash anymore, and I haven't for a really long time.
I don't either.
And yeah. And so the card gets used for everything, and I just, it doesn't expire, I think, until next year, towards the end of the year, and yeah, it's still freaking dead.
Well, now, do you have the touch chip? I can't remember the name of it.
I do. The touch still works really well on it. The chip doesn't. Like the tap to pay, that works on it, but the chip doesn't. Not every place has tap to pay yet.
See,
and then the swipe, because it has the chip, the swipe never works because it says, "Oh, you need to use the chip."
Yeah.
And then my chip just doesn't always work all that well.
Well, I could if I needed a new card. That's trivial because they print the cards up right there in the branch now. They just don't put the chip, the NFC.
I could walk into my bank and walk out with a new card. It's just, getting to the bank while the bank is open is my problem.
Yeah, that's huge. And I use a credit union, and credit unions are traditionally old school when it comes to their hours. They're not open on Saturdays, and that's usually the only time I've got to do anything like that.
Right, right.
But I agree with the cash thing. I'm one of the few people, and in my little niche of the world, around the kind of people that I work with, I'll say something like, "Yeah, they could stop using cash altogether, and it wouldn't bother me." And boy, oh boy, the reaction I get out of people when I say that.
Yeah. Oh well.
Because
Cash has its uses on occasion, but yeah. I mean, most of the time, even like person to person anymore, I'm gonna use Zelle.
Cash App, or these things are so. Cash App is just so trivial to set up and give money to people if you need to.
Right.
I like technology that works. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think I have both Cash App and Zelle set up because some people just don't take Zelle. But my bank just has Zelle set up, so it's super freaking easy.
I got something else. I don't remember what it is. I'm looking through. I have so many apps.
Right. I need to go in there and clean up my apps again. I know it does it automatically for me sometimes, but then sometimes, I don't know if they're activating in the background or something that keeps them from automatically getting, blacklisted or soft removed, prevented from updating.
They go, well, you got the same. You still have the Note 10 Plus?
Yeah.
It tries to put stuff in deep sleep. The first thing mine
Yeah.
always wants to put in deep sleep is the TikTok app. Apparently that app, they need to do some work on that because it seems to always run a little bit too much in the background for Samsung's taste, I guess. And so it puts that to deep sleep. But oftentimes I get those messages where it wants to either uninstall or disable a lot of apps that I don't use, and then I end up ignoring those messages because it's always
right
when I don't have time to get into it.
Yeah.
But
it's not AOSP, but I am planning on reinstalling Manjaro on the Pine phone that one of our listeners sent to me because I want to test out some more X to go with it.
You know what I wish they would do? If they would make a lineage image for that Pine phone, I would probably buy.
What, like an Android image for it?
Yeah, a fully.
I'd be okay with that too, because then you could switch back and forth and test out Linux distros and use it as your daily driver with an AOSP.
Yeah, I am more interested in AOSP on a mobile device than I am with Linux on it because
I was
still gonna want the apps,
I was so excited about Maru, and it's the convergence.
That's the one.
And then it just
the Debian desktop and all that on there.
Yeah. So it was running Android, but then you hook it up to a screen and it's running Linux, and then it just went nowhere really.
Yeah.
I guess there wasn't enough of an adoption because I was waiting for it to be more adopted, and I'm sure there were a lot of other users like me, but I also wasn't going to, contribute back to the code base or anything. So
I think that's the question I have: is how many users are there? Because I think I found you really interested, and Majid's
is he robotic or is that just my end?
Sounding like dog shit right now, Eric.
Right.
Something happened. I don't know what. It's not working.
Sounds like you shorted your microphone.
Something didn't. Because you
Is that better? Sounds like bad 1980s sci-fi.
He's out of here. There's a project, and I've got it installed on here. There's literally a Debian app that gives you an XFCE desktop. And what I haven't had a chance to test this. It'll bring XFCE up on the phone, and it runs surprisingly well. What I was wondering is if I could use that in conjunction with Dex, like have Dex putting that up on a screen, and then I have the Debian desktop. I wonder how robust that would be.
Well, I was using Chrome Remote Desktop, but now I just can't get Chrome Remote Desktop to work anymore. And that was working really well on Dex because I don't know, they've got it so that I can't turn it on, so it's on the desktop side that it's not working. I don't know if they just did that for Linux or what, but I cannot turn it on at all. But I used to be able to like hook it up to hook my phone up to a monitor and then use the Dex to just access. I spin off a new desktop with it, which was awesome, from my home server, and just be able to use Linux right there on my phone, like I was sitting in front of my computer at home.
Oh, like a remote desktop thing.
Yeah, remote desktop. But since it's spinning off a new desktop, I didn't have to worry about the fact that my home computer has 2 monitors. So I'm not screen mirroring. I'm spinning off a new desktop.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I would probably have use for that too, being on the road. But I've just.
Oh yeah.
I don't let this thing run. I've got these servers running all the time, obviously, but this thing gets shut down and then the power cut off for it. You got it working, Eric?
I don't know.
There you go.
Yep,
How does it
much
sound?
better. 100% better.
There you go.
Yeah, it was Discord. I just had to close out a voice and come back in.
I don't use
I double checked in Audacity, but
you using that flat pack of Discord? Because I've been having trouble with
I don't
that.
think so.
I'm just using the.
I'm on Arch, so I think I'm just using the standard package.
You mean you're on Arch and you didn't tell us?
Well, I'm on Manjaro, so I'm kind of on Arch.
Yeah, that still counts as Arch. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm on Arch.
They make me tell every time.
Oh no, we don't make you. You just say it, and then 5 minutes later you say it again, because you use Arch.
But that's the rule.
And then we just say, hey, so what you're saying is you use Arch.
But you do have to qualify some statements with, I'm on Arch. You kind of have to, because it's just different enough that I think a lot of people might either assume that he's on Mint, or might assume that he's using Ubuntu, or might assume what he's saying applies to what they're doing, and they go to look for a Discord package in the repositories, and they go, "Well, that's not there."
That's strange too, because.
Or what the hell's the AUR? That's not on.
But Discord's not in the AUR; it's in the community repo. And
no. I'm just saying as an example, if you were to reference that.
And I'm wondering why in the heck that shows up in the community repo for Arch, but nobody else seems to package it up except for.
Oh, hey, did I mention just a little while ago that I was installing Manjaro? Oh, yeah, I did.
You said something about it on your phone.
Like it.
Yeah, on a Pine phone.
Maybe you can help Moss.
Oh God, is Moss installing Manjaro?
He was installing Ubuntu Touch on a 3T. And he said that it didn't. He tried to install it a couple times because it didn't work the first however many times. Now he's trying to run recovery, and recovery's not working. What did he say? Yeah, he's got a whole list of grievances. But anyway, I had encouraged him. I just said, "Yeah, well, if you've got it," I said, "Is that your main handset?" He's like, "No." I said, "Well, if it's just sitting there, why don't you just try?" Because he said, "I want to try Ubuntu Touch on it," and I'm like, "Okay, well, why don't you?" So apparently, this is why.
Well, I'll tell you what I want to do with Moss is I want to take one of these extra towers I've got and build him a podcasting rig that he just leaves it the hell alone.
No.
You're one of those ones that have the lock on it.
He wouldn't be Moss at that point if he didn't put his own.
He will not have root privileges to this machine.
Oh, ouch! No trust, no love.
Nice.
Because-
That's right. You're gonna get a tower that
Harsh.
has the gumball lock on it,
Yeah.
the gumball machine lock on
Yeah,
it,
and I'm gonna get a Kensington lock and lock it down to the table. That way he can't take it and have
Oh, that's
anybody.
messed up, bro.
But no, people, a lot of people. I don't mess with this thing when I'm trying crazy new stuff. I don't do that on the machine that I got to make shows with because I need.
I
This
have
thing to
multiple
work.
I have multiple machines.
Yeah.
So if I bork one of them, I'm gonna be able to use one of the other ones.
Yeah.
To be fair, recording a podcast is very in terms of getting a machine up, getting Audacity on it, or getting a browser or whatever. I mean, you're talking minutes worth of effort. But once you've got all of the tools set up for producing a podcast, editing and all of that stuff, like the files are in the right place, and if you have to reset all that, it is a pain in the.
But
in
he
the
has
butt,
the most esoteric problems with Video Ninja of anybody I've seen.
Last week, what was that last week? Anyway?
Well, he was using Bodhi, and I don't think Bodhi's got the right AV stack on it.
Right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And he might have been using the out-of-date Debian Chromium package, which that'll screw things up too. I don't know. So that's why I was thinking I'm going to build him a mint cinnamon. Put cinnamon on it and get cinnamon working. That way I know all of the video acceleration is working right. And then set up the Video Ninja with a web app, because that's another cool tool that Mint has, is that web app manager. And I use that quite a bit to create. Basically, I silo off a lot of these services so that they've got no concept of each other. And that works good for that.
Oh, you know what's going to be a good use case for an immutable system? There you go.
Yeah.
Right? Get that all set up, lock it down, and it's like, here, you can install Flatpaks if you want. You want to run app images, go for it.
Oh,
that core system.
Yeah, he'll still be able to install Flatpaks. Now I got to figure out a way to lock that down. I know. I will alias the Flatpak command to something dev null. The only way he'll be able now, see, then he'll still have the software center. I got to put some thought into this to create a machine that is
moss proofing,
that it is impervious to whatever anybody could do to screw it up. And then I'm gonna crunch.
Okay, no, that sounds like a challenge. That's all I'm saying there.
I might have to put some money into this too. But I would.
Right.
But imagine a world where we can just start the show and everybody's got everything working. But here's the weird part. Three Fat Truckers. Those two guys are the existential opposite of guys that would do mintCast. They have no idea what they're doing with this stuff, but it works 100% of the time for them because they don't go fiddling with this stuff. They don't go trying these things. They just start it up. They do the thing I tell them to do, nothing more and nothing less, and it works 100% of the time when we're making Three Fat Truckers.
Yeah.
And
so is he like distro hopping and doing all kinds of
I think so.
On that machine. See, he always talks about having laptops and all this other stuff. So I assume he has spare hardware that he's using for the other stuff, but maybe he's not. I hadn't even considered that he would be doing that on his primary system.
I think he gets irritated at distributions, and so he just throws the whole thing. And like this last time, I don't know what he had. I thought he had Mint Mate on, and I guess he was getting on okay with that. But then for some reason, he got irritated and put Bodhi on it. But he's a huge fan of the Bodhi project. Well,
there's nothing wrong with but having I mean, I think the way most people do it is it's a little more pragmatic, where you kind of have a second machine, or you dual boot and have, dual booting is actually probably the best way, because then you're running it on the exact same hardware. But then you can kind of move things over as
You
you
know
know,
the problem
as
I'm
you
having
figure.
with dual booting right now? My wife's machine is dual booting Windows 11 with uh, Kubuntu. And the problem
Okay.
with that is that LVF, or the vendor firmware updates that are coming through on Linux, if
Hmm.
Linux updates firmware on something and then she goes to try to boot into Windows, it will lock it down. You got to go get into the BitLocker thing on Windows and enter in
Oh
a
yeah.
code and all that crap because of the
Right.
TPM module. And
Yeah.
so that's happened twice. So I ended up disabling the FWUPD or whatever it is in Kubuntu that was doing the firmware
Mm.
updates. So I was thinking about doing a blog post about that, where if anybody's doing any dual booting, to disable the firmware updates on the Linux side, because it'll cause Windows 11 to shit the bed because it thinks something was changed that shouldn't have been, and it's
Yeah.
probably the way it
It
was
makes sense.
designed. Yeah.
Well, I always get the time zone difference thing, where if I boot into Linux, I'm using UTC, and that sets the machine date, and then I go into Linux, or no, the other way around. Linux is fine. Then I go into Windows, and the time is 12 hours ahead or something, 8 hours ahead, whatever whatever, 5 hours ahead, right? Because I'm 5 hours back from UTC.
There's an article
Um,
on the Arch Wiki about that, where you can do a little registry hack to tell Windows
in
to use
Windows.
UTC and
Oh,
then
that would probably
stops that
make
problem.
sense.
Yeah, there's
I
a
just don't use it enough for it to be a like the once a month or once every other month I boot into it. It's just like, just set the clock. But I've become that way. Like, it is a sort of a sidebar. I was always that person where it was like, I have to fix it. And that was my profession. I think that was the driver. Was I was still neck deep in my career, and I was like, if I let details go, they tended to snowball on me. And
yeah.
so, like, if I had to address something when it came up, and like everything was like that for me on my personal machines and everything. Now I'm like, you know what? Who cares? Like, whoop de doo, like. So anyway, a detail like that, it's just funny to think, like, so at some point in my life I would have been like, I have to fix it. Oh, there's a registry fix. Great. Now let's go. Let's go do it. Or now I'm like, I don't care.
I think
I'll just
if it
change the
was
clock.
causing any real problems, because usually, like, if I'm dual boot, which I don't anymore, uh, I've got Windows 11 and a KVM on this machine.
Wait a minute. You run Arch and you don't dual boot?
No, the,
Holy
the
cow.
the two machines that are running Arch are that one's
Look
got
out.
KDE, one's got XFCE, and that's all that's on them. Now the wife's machine dual boots because of her
Yeah.
silly little
It's
find
okay,
the
man.
objects
It's
games.
it's just not worth fighting the battle, brother.
Ah,
It's just
I because
not.
I've gotten to the point where there's not much outside of gaming that I really need Windows for anymore. That ex-
Even gaming, I mean, I know, like, I have these. I have a friend, Adam, who's on Linux Saloon every now and then. You probably don't know who he is, but he's this. He's a DevOps guy. He's super technical, like, but he's not married to Linux, and like he's this mentality of like, I paid for this hardware. I've got a 4097 or whatever the hell that card is. And if it gets me 10 more frames a second to run Windows over Linux and Proton, then I'm going to run Windows, because I want that 10 frames a second, buddy. Whereas,
Oh, it's you know, I can understand his point of view there, but it's not usually just 10 frames per second.
no, no
It's usually a
you
little
got
bit more, and the
right.
graphics are
HDR, and
cleaner.
Well, so apparently NVIDIA is doing something with AI in frame rate, where he said if I run this on Linux, I get 40 frames a second. But if I run it on Windows, there's some sort of AI algorithm that runs that like interpolates the next 3 frames or something, and so he gets like 160 frames a second. And he's like, the difference is 100% different. And if I run it on Windows and I'm used to playing that way and I go to Linux, it's just not acceptable. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Like that's an absolutely different thing. And you're right. So I think there's probably a lot of situations like that. My experience has been the games I'm playing and the hardware I have, it makes almost no difference. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people who don't have a 4000 series NVIDIA card. But I'm happy with my 20 frames less a second if I'm even playing a game. I don't know. Windows just, there was that point in my life where everything I did had to be on Windows because of the tool set that I was using and the business processes I was supporting and like just all that stuff. And like, it had to be Windows, but maybe that's still true of some things, but by and large, like everything's just on the web, in a browser now, if it's not a native application. So for me, and maybe that I'm just lucky that that's the case, and there are still people that get sucked into that and get stuck. Um,
Yeah, my kids, their laptops are all running Windows, and they probably always will because it's not the gaming story has gotten better on Linux, yes, but hmm, until I'm able to get Xbox Live on,
mm,
working on Proton and the what's the other thing, the NVIDIA GeForce, what is the gaming platform they got? I can't remember.
Experience,
Yeah. Um, and there's games on
GeForce
that they,
Experience.
yeah,
Mm. Oh, GeForce Now, GeForce
GeForce
Now.
Now. Yeah, they use
But I thought that
that.
was a browser thing.
Um, well, there's an app, so I don't know. I don't sit and
Ah,
play with it because the one machine I've got that's got an NVIDIA card in it is that laptop that's running Arch with KDE, and once KDE kind of got the Wayland thing figured out, everything just started working. Because prior to that, I had to do this thing with the Optimus where I had to switch. I had to use tools like Bumblebee or
mm-hmm,
Optimus Manager to switch back and forth between um, the NVIDIA and the Intel cards. And then
mm-hmm,
once
mm-hmm.
Wayland got working really well, this is, I can go without Wayland on here, but on that machine, I tell you what, now all you've got to do is run the Intel GPU for everything, and then when you spin up a game like on Steam or something that requires direct rendering, it spins up your NVIDIA card intelligently and uses that for the stuff it needs, and it works flawlessly. But it's just Steam.
Mm.
If we applied that same technology to things like the biggest one is the Xbox Live, the Game Pass Ultimate thing that they use, that I pay
Okay.
$15 a month times 3 for them to have, that's probably one of the best values out there for subscription services because they've got access to
So many different games and
so
stuff.
many games. But again,
Yeah.
that's there is some cloud game. If you've got the Edge browser, you've got access to some of those, just like the way Stadia used to work back when that was a thing.
Mm.
Um, it was interesting about the time Stadia stopped being a thing. Uh, Microsoft spun up their cloud gaming, and fundamentally, it doesn't
Yeah.
work any better or any worse, but it works on Linux. But I can't really push it off on the family until it's all working on Linux. So I don't have
Well, go ahead. You don't have a.
I don't have a real big problem with people using Windows really because I mean, like we said before, it's
It's a
correct.
tool.
It's the tool for the job.
Yeah. Exactly. It is absolutely. And now, if you have a choice of tools and each tool works equally well, and Linux or open source is one of those tools, and you choose not to use it, then
See,
maybe then I can have a bit of
there's
an
where,
argument with you,
yeah,
but
and I completely agree. And I'll take it a step further. If perhaps there's a tool I can use on Linux or a tool that's open source, and it requires a little bit of learning, but it's not
mhm,
beyond the realm of what somebody like myself can handle, then I'm going to take the time to learn it, or I'm going to attempt to, and
right.
I'm going to, because I value the reward,
Mhm.
the rewarding experience that goes along with that.
There aren't many fields, many areas of expertise that are as open as technology is, and especially so that wasn't true. When I went to tech school, like a lot of the value of that for me was because I had access to software, hardware, things that I couldn't possibly have access to on my own without a lot of capital to do it. The school provided that environment for me, and then rolled that into me working in the enterprise and on that same set of tools. But the fact that if you want to learn networking, you want to learn software development of just about any kind you can imagine, if you want to learn you know hardware's still tough because you got to have the physical piece of equipment, but software based things, the idea that, and I've known a lot of really excellent software developers and engineers who never went to school because they didn't have to. They could learn all this stuff. If you, there is something to be valued and said about self-starting and having the interest and the initiative to make something happen on your own. Like one of the people I always think of in my old company was the before networking, they would have to run tapes. This was medical transcription. So he literally would go to facilities and just pick up tapes and bring them back to the office. And that's what he did for a while because he was a young guy and like he didn't have any initiative or direction. And then he realized they were having some issues with their system of trying to get some registering tapes or something. It was like they were using a crappy spreadsheet. And he's like, there's got to be a better way. And he just took the initiative. And before you knew it, within a few years, like he was building, he was programming stuff for them in a very rudimentary way, but he was doing it. And then he built off of that and he built off of that. And by the time I knew him, it was 15 years later, and he's a senior software developer who never spent 1 minute in a classroom or in a, because he didn't have to. And I can't think of very many six-figure job opportunities where you can just walk in and with a little bit of interest and initiative, like do that.
I
That's hugely impressive. Yeah.
you describe that, and I think back to 1993 when uh, a friend of mine, I was in the Army, and a friend of mine had gone off to Indiana University, and he was in the physics and chemistry program down there. And I talked to him one day, I think it was towards the end of '93. He told me he was changing his degree to computers, something to do with computers. And I remember thinking, because that was, computers weren't quite so interesting in those days to normal people. And I
Yeah.
remember asking him, oh, what are you going to do? Get a job for NASA? I didn't, it wasn't until the early 2000s before I even knew how to turn one of these things on. And then, uh, of course, I go to school for it, but none of the things we learned in the early 2000s are, unfortunately, not
I
really
can
useful.
attest to that,
Not really
brother.
useful anymore. It was
That's
just,
not entirely true. There's the basics are still there. Hardware
yeah.
fundamentals, networking fundamentals, that
But
troubleshooting, like it's,
none of this
but
cloud or
the yeah,
containerization or any of
exactly.
that stuff. The
Right.
cloud, they were starting to talk about the cloud in those days, but it was mostly within the context of storage. There was nobody assumed we'd be able to run
Or
application payloads or anything
or
like
how do you
that.
scale your virtual machine infrastructure?
Yeah,
That's where I remember cloud starting to be a thing
right.
because we were using so many VMs and stuff like that. So,
And I remember professors in those days saying, predicting that the operating system was going to be the operating system of the future was going to be something hard coded into the motherboard of machines. That was a strange belief, strange thinking. But I remember hearing two different professors in those days giving very compelling arguments why that might be a reality in the future, because just that way you don't have to have a firmware layer. You know the operating system can speak directly to the hardware, and of course skipping over all of the vulnerabilities with a system like that. Um, so how little did
On
we
backwards
know?
compatibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Little things. Little
well,
things.
a lot of people are really not. They're not taking into account how much backwards compatibility matters to a company like Microsoft. It's probably
Yeah.
their most important thing is the
Without
fact
a
that
doubt.
you can take I don't know, Lotus for Windows 3.1 and install it on Windows 11 and it'll work, one way or the other. You can't do that with Linux. Well,
Yeah.
not without some sort of containerization or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's just amazing though that you can, in spite of the fact that I didn't learn any of this Docker stuff or any of the modern uh, networking stuff until I sit down and I watch a few YouTube videos, some pretty well made YouTube videos, and then start tinkering with this stuff, and then next thing you know,
Yeah.
you're running 8 websites in Docker and
It's the truth of anything. I mean, and I don't know how you learn. I mean, I am very much if I don't do it myself, it'll never stick in my head.
right, yeah,
And so, and I've always been that way. So even if you just literally showed it to me and 30 seconds later, I probably, because I may have only been half paying attention because I was already thinking about like how I would do it or like, how I
yes,
would try it.
yes,
Uh, but that's okay. That's what you want in a technician. That's what you want
yeah,
in an engineer. You want someone that is like, isn't, and that's, I value the fact that I learned before Google was a thing where I had to think for myself. And I think that I've noticed in my own, in myself, like the reliance on the hive mind is a real thing. I was very resourceful for a long time because I had to be. And that just became less and less the case as the years have gone by to the point where now it's like, I literally know that I'm choosing not to memorize something because I can just look it up. Like, why would I bother? And that wasn't really always the case. And I think I'm probably, I don't know. On one hand, I think, well, that's good because that was probably useless information in the long run, or not really something you needed to know every day. But on the other hand, like maybe there's no good balance of that where you're not able to be discerning enough to say, well, this is important to memorize. Anyway, I'm glad that I was resourceful enough to sort of have to figure things out myself. And I think, as newer technologies come up, it because you and I and other people were coming from those older generations or iterations of technology, we have an understanding of sort of a lower level of things that I don't think there's any expectation that a lot of these people coming up today who are learning a programming language, who are learning DevOps, who are learning cloud technologies have a real fundamental understanding of like hardware and systems and how things work together and bandwidth and bottlenecks and latency, like all these sort of things that you know when you're dealing with hardware and software closely, like you're talking about, literally the software talking to the hardware. We've abstracted things. Sorry, we're so high up now with containers. You're like, how many layers up are you over, the machine code that's running on that board,
yeah,
and how many things could happen in that stack that just get weird and you don't know, well, where's the weirdness? And like, so I think we are able to understand all of the things that came before. And if I needed to, I absolutely know that I could learn Docker very quickly. And if I had a project where it was like, you have to roll out systems or you're now responsible for, if I'm responsible for it, you bet your butt I'm going to know
Yeah, Docker's
how to
really not
do.
hard to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And
got a couple of
it's
things you got
just,
to wrap your head around, and then things will just start falling into place. With
yeah. And
Docker.
it's just because I haven't had a reason, why don't I know every programming language in the world? Because I don't need to. I haven't had a real reason to.
Yeah.
I've learned the ones that I need to know to the level that I need to know them. And as I needed to know them more, I learned them more. And I think that just is sort of how, at least for me, how that works. But it's about, can you learn the information and apply it? And I think so. That's why I don't ever feel bad about the fact, like, I don't really know much about it because I don't really need to know. And I'm glad that, I don't know. I know the containerization has revolutionized, the concept of DevOps and being able to just spin up nothing machines for the time you need them and use them and throw them away. And you don't have all of the overhead and cruft of a VM and all that stuff. But also you don't have that level of, I don't know, whenever it's not like I haven't used Docker. It's just I'm not what I would consider to be proficient. I don't know. A lot of times I just don't see the huge benefit over running it on a VM or even bare metal if it's like a VPS or something like that, which I know isn't technically bare metal, but on a dedicated OS, let's say. Um, I just, I mean,
I think
again,
the benefit is just scale, from my point of view, because I've
yeah,
got these two
and
machines.
reproducibility, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, and I can have two machines running 8 websites and a cloud server and a Jellyfin server and a audio bookshelf server and the Collabora
And
server,
just put
which
a
is
proxy in front of it.
oh yeah, the big one here is running the proxy, and
Yeah,
this stuff just works. And
right.
it's if I tried that with
The
virtual
problem is it
machines,
works until it doesn't.
yeah, I
And
mean,
that's been
yeah,
the so I was looking today and I know this is true of a lot of things, but Linux Lugcast, they were talking about something whale. It's a music server. It's got a dumb name. Anyway, so he writes up the instructions, and they're basically like, the tech equivalent of like, rub your belly and pat your pat your head. And it's so silly because like the development is done in these containers on everything is so specific to an exact version. And and it has to be configured. It's everything feels so fragile. You know what I mean? Like I've just had so many. I was administering a bunch of different containers for Discord, not Discord, Discourse,
discourse.
the forum software. That's the only way you could get it was as a container. So fine, I had to sort of figure that out. It was every time I had to upgrade to a new version, it was going to break. And it was going to break in some new and unique way that I hadn't seen before, that I didn't understand and I don't even think, honestly, that if I was really proficient in container technology, that it would have saved me any hassle, because it wasn't that I didn't understand how to run the commands, or it was that the error message I was getting back was either nonsense or was something completely related to some weird missing dependency, or it had nothing to do with Docker. and
Well,
and
was
that's the way these containers, maybe it's just the way that people build software now that kind of perplexes me, where everything just feels so kludgy and like sloppy,
the thing
because
about
they just go
these,
and pull a container image from somewhere and they're like,
yeah,
oh well, that's all I need, and I'll just start throwing crap at that. And like, I don't know.
Well, the thing about these Docker containers, like the Nextcloud, for example. Now I'm running our Nextcloud server is bare metal, um, but from what I understand, with the Nextcloud Docker container, you would not want to update Docker the normal way through the interface from within the container. You all of the updating has to be done on the container level, which means you're basically leaving it up to the container developer to
To
handle
repackage
to
it, yeah,
repackage it every time there is an update. And because,
or rewrite the requirements
right,
file or whatever. Yeah.
because you run into these problems where it's the base container is like an 1804 image or something like that, and the new version of the software needs the tool chain that's on 2004 and above or something like that, and you don't have it, but you've updated the software inside the container, and now it won't work because it needs the updated tool chain stack.
Mm,
And that's why they tell you don't update the software inside the container. Allow the container to do all of the updating, which
yeah.
is, I don't know that they do a good enough job making sure people understand that, because you install something like Nextcloud, and Nextcloud, really doesn't have. I've ran it on a container and
Well, and as an admin, you go into the admin console and
and it really
it
doesn't.
says, "Hey, there's an update. Click
Yeah, and
here."
so you run the update. Oh, yeah, now this isn't working, and oh, by the way, you really borked your system. This is an
Hope you had a
unrecoverable
backup.
state. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hope
Yeah,
you had a backup. So it's sometimes
yeah.
I don't think they do a good enough job making sure that people that use it's almost like there's the assumption that everybody that's using Docker containers are developers or container
Well,
developers, and they're aware of this
and,
concept.
and discourse in particular was an absolute flippin' nightmare because the information you needed was buried in a discourse forum somewhere. And good luck finding it
Yeah.
because you had to you tease apart the error message and you like pick out the certain words that you think are going to fire back a result for you, and like you had to play decipher the error message, and then maybe you find half truths somewhere where it's like, well, if you update this, that'll work, and then you try that. No, that didn't do it. Then, oh my goodness, the amount of time I would spend, and this was all just free work for people. I'm doing like helping them with their project or their
Mm.
podcast or like whatever they're doing. I'm not getting paid for it, and it's like the reason I do that stuff is because it exposes me to things I haven't done, and like I figure, well, the knowledge I'm gaining is
Because
my
it's
payment.
fun.
It is fun.
Oh,
It's
not
rewarding.
anymore.
Why did you take that apart, Joe? Because it's fun.
And
Well, so they, yeah.
I think I play it really dangerous too, because I need these things to just keep churning away while I'm on the road all week, and so I do the thing that most of these developers tell you not to. I run this container called Watchtower, which, like, it watches Docker Hub to see if there's been an update to that container, and it shuts down the container, pulls the new image, and then spins up the new container, and that's
Right.
all done automatically. And there's not a single container developer out there that uh, recommends you do that. But I need a
Nope.
certain
Because you
amount of,
have to have.
yeah, I need the
Go ahead.
automation. But
Right, and they can't because of the way that they publish these things. And Nextcloud's a perfect example. If Nextcloud were following some sort of like rigorous deployment structure or uh, software release structure, like they wouldn't care that you click it in the because it would work,
yeah,
but it's not going to work because of the way they orchestrate the container and the way and so many of these projects are like that, and that's what I mean. Like they just feel flimsy. They feel like, and this is we're talking real workload here. This isn't like some BS. Like you got a discourse server, like there's information in there that's important, and like you don't want to lose it. And it's not a it's like your users have put so much effort into posting things and answering posts and all this like time they've spent. And if you come back and you're like, oops, I lost the data, like you might as well just shut the server off and walk away, because at
And
that point they're going to be
yeah,
like, I'm not posting on here
I
anymore.
feel the pressure of that with like the mintCast website, for example. That that website has got posts going all the way back to the early 2000s. I mean, there's 421 episodes, 421 posts, and that's all on that website, and that is a considerable amount of data. And not so much in terms of size, because it's surprising how small it is
Yeah.
when you back it up. And I was really surprised when I took over that website that there was absolutely no mitigation in place whatsoever. I mean, there was a add-on to do some backing up and that, but they weren't. Nobody had ever like took the time to set up, some
Well,
automatic backups.
Bill,
Yeah.
what's your backup look like now?
Well, our website backs up every day at 10 o'clock to the Google Drive with the
Okay.
WP Vivid add-on. Every
Okay.
day, every single day, it'll back up to the Google Drive. So that's just
Oh, you
never.
forgot about your other backup.
What's that? The next
Me.
cloud? Okay, well then
Yeah.
you're backing up too. So, um, I must have said something googly because my phone just lit up.
Oh my goodness, that happens to me. If I wasn't wearing earphones, it would happen.
Oh
You
God.
know, though, if you were to work with websites as often as I do, you would not be surprised at anything, because I'm talking about, I go into situations where a customer's paying, one of them was paying $650 a month to a marketing firm to manage their website and hosting, and to do their social media posts and stuff like that. I mean, grossly overpaid, right? And the basics of the site itself, like there was no backup, there was no upgrade and update management maintenance process in place. They had stuff out of date by like years. And like, you walk into a situation like that and you feel like a sucker, first of all, because you're like, why aren't I charging $650 a month
Yeah.
per customer? And second of all, like, you go,
To
how
do nothing. To do
to do nothing?
650 bucks a month to do nothing.
No, to pay some kid to make stupid social media posts. That's exactly what it was. That was the value, and then to send them some report at the end of the month to like, hey, look at your click rate or whatever BS stats they were able to
I'm getting
pull.
ready to make a resume. That's all I got to say. I'm looking for a career
It
change.
is, but see, that's the thing. There is a huge difference and a huge disconnect between the administrative side of technology and the usage side of technology. And people, and especially with stuff like websites where they're, WordPress and other sort of democratizing technologies that allows non-technical people to use technology, they don't understand. And I can't even necessarily fault everyone that I've come in afterwards, because a lot of these people just, they don't know what they don't know. They see some company or organization like WordPress says, just download this file, go to this hosting provider, or go to a hosting provider, even better. You don't have to download anything. You just say, click here and put in your domain, and it's just all, but they don't understand that there's a whole maintenance and administrative, and like, it doesn't just take care of itself. But they don't know that. And none of the companies that they're buying those services with are transparent enough to say to them, hey, dummy, this isn't turnkey. This isn't managed service. Oh, if you want that, you're going to be paying $100 a month or something. But yeah, there's just a lot of situations where things aren't done. I mean, and this is every industry, right? Things just are never done to a certain level. Nothing that would make me feel comfortable. I mean, Joe, I'm sure you walk into places all the time where it's just like, what the hell is going on here? But I don't know. Anyway, I think I need a bit of a break.
That's
Been
okay.
sitting here too long.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get up for a little bit.
I want to mention that while we were sitting here talking, I was working, and I also installed Octopi on my Raspberry Pi 4 since I haven't done anything with that in a while. And I hooked a
You
camera up to
slacker.
it. Yeah, I know, right? Right. It's just been sitting there collecting dust and in its lovely NES case. So yeah, it seems a little OP to be running an Octopi server, but since it wasn't doing anything anyway,
Eh.
yeah.
Why not? Why
And now
not?
I currently have a print going that's running off my old S7. So once that's finished, I will move it over and test the connectivity between the Raspberry Pi and the USB cable to my machine. And then I'm going to 3D print an adapter mount for the this old Logitech camera that I have, webcam that I have sitting here, so that I can mount it to a 1/4-inch bolt using
nice.
a heat set insert. And see how all that goes. I think that should be fairly easy. And then
Now you've done it.
yeah, now I've done it. But yeah, I'll pull out my caliper and I'll design it in Tinkercad, and I'll make the bottom thick enough to hold that insert, and then I should be able to use the mounts that I already have over there to get it set up at the right height and pointing in the right direction, and yeah, I will be ready to print with the Raspberry Pi 4, and then I will reset up my Zero, because I have a Zero, and use that, or well, no, I have a 0W, and I'll use that for testing purposes, because evidently the 0W can't do camera and camera streaming and actually print. It can print without the camera, but it doesn't have the bandwidth to do it with the camera. So
32-bit.
yeah, my Raspberry Pi 0W with the USB hub attached to the top and with the 3D printed case to hold it all together. I'm going to use that to do my testing on in the future.
I've got one of those 02Ws, and that's actually a fairly impressive little piece of kit.
Oh yeah, because the 02W can actually run Octoprint and the streamer at the same time.
It's got the same. I think it's got the same CPU as the 3, or basically the same, but it's still got the 512 meg RAM. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here.
Yep.
All right, so we're done. All right, talk to you guys later.
Yep, we'll see you. Thanks for everybody for watching.